Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. From Apple and EMI to Disney and Ceviche, Martin Allen Morales' career spans industries and companies which most would only dream of working within. But for dreams to be formed, you need imagination. As CEO of the Institute of Imagination, he's empowering kids to reimagine their future, just as he did. We're treated to a journey like no other on Pivot Points this week, as Martin takes us from his upbringing in Peru to launching a Paddington-approved restaurant, to working with the Jonas Brothers, and so much more. Welcome to Pivot Points, Martin, and fantastic to have you. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. Could we start by you just explaining a little bit about yourself so that our listeners can get excited by who I'm talking to?
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here. Well, I use my creativity, leadership, and lived experience growing up in Peru and Colville in the Midlands to create beautiful and memorable things, experiences that people love, that open up opportunities for people and communities who are now going through challenging times. And I've always done that. And the Institute of Imagination is a great place for my work. So I'm the CEO here, and we help kids and their communities going through tough times dream bigger, to build confidence and get the skills they need to create a better future in this complicated world that we're in this fast-changing world that we're in, and in this world that we don't know, how the future will be. What with technology, AI, and the different conflicts that the world is going through. So at the IOI, we provide children with the tools, space, and opportunities to imagine, to create, to achieve their full potential. That's how I always like to think about it. For me, imagination is the foundation for creativity. Creativity fuels progress. And so through our STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths workshops and events and educator training, we empower children to develop critical skills, expand access to STEAM education and in communities that need it most, and connect talent with opportunity into pathways and higher education and meaningful careers, hopefully. So yeah, and I guess people know me as a creative leader. So I use my creativity, my leadership, my entrepreneurship to drive change across education and business and communities. I'm a bit of a bridge builder, I guess, bringing people from unlikely sources, from unlikely places, from big brands to grassroots groups together to create partnerships. And I'd like to think that I'm a systems changer. I try my best to challenge and transform systems to make them more inclusive and fair for everyone, especially for people that are experiencing tough times.
And what got you passionate about creativity? I mean, that's an attribute and a quality that, is something is really powerful within the British psyche. But what got you particularly passionate about creativity?
Well, I came from a background living in Peru, growing up in Peru and seeing inequality firsthand, seeing children with a lack of opportunity. My grandmother was a regenerative farmer. She lived in the mountains. And you can see poverty firsthand there. Electricity didn't come to her village until about the late 70s, TV until the mid 80s, and then telephone until the mid 90s. So, the level of inequalities that I experienced through my own family and watching people trying to make a better life for themselves, and particularly children on the streets of Lima, was tough. Even as I was a young boy, I could feel that, and it created a reaction in me that I just realized that the world's not fair. And when I came to this country, fleeing what was violence of the Shining Path guerrillas in the mid 80s, I came here with my English dad. My dad was from Britain. He was from Leicestershire, and we landed into his county, which is Leicestershire, fabulous place. But we landed in a place called Colville, which is a coal mining town, and Thatcher had closed the mines, and things were very tough there. So I suffered a lot of racism there. So all these experiences, and some would say some traumas as well, really made me think about how I wanted to imagine a different life, how I managed to make progress in life, how I wanted to help others, how I wanted to, as I said before, sort of create beautiful things. So that really pushed my imagination, pushed my creativity, made me sort of drive forward new ideas, as well as the amazing people that I met along the way in schools that I was part of, not just in the UK, but in Peru.
I mean, I grew up in a coal mining town as well, Dinnington, and it was a very tough upbringing, but I think I learned an awful lot of ingenuity as a result of having to survive in that type of environment. Do you think, although at the time I never thought it was pleasant, I actually now think that it was helpful in making me the person that I am? And, I look back on those times and think, actually, I hated it, but actually it was good for me. Do you have similar sorts of feelings as to...
Yeah, look, there's no better way to be a change maker, social or environmental change maker, than to experience it.
Yeah.
And that's what I experienced in Colville. I had friends that were on the poverty line. I had friends that experienced awful things at home and at school. And I could understand that as a community as well. The same school that I went to where I experienced that racism and those challenges today is still a school that is underperforming and is still blighted by racism. So that makes me do the work that I do today. But it also made me think of made me experience what it is to live not in a bubble of London or of fancy conferences like the one we've just been to. That's amazing, and not a bubble per se, but it, really understand problems from a community level, from a grassroots level, from a ground level. And there's no better training and experience than actually living through it.
Yeah, no, and I think that sort of first-hand experience, and then wanting to help people to actually better themselves, if you can carry that forward into your life. Now, I know when you sort of started work, you've worked for some cool companies. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the worlds of EMI and Apple and Disney.
At university, I was curious. I was entrepreneurial. I started to create my own events. I started to create events where food and music were important. In fact, I created an event called the Global Kitchen where I would DJ and cook at the same time. I loved music from around the world, and I've always loved food from around the world as well. So I was passionate about, music from Africa, from Cuba, from India, from different places. And the same again with food. So I brought that together there, was quite entrepreneurial, creating concerts, where 2 people started going to, and then 200 people. And that grew into a real passion and love for the music industry, for music. And so I've always been a record collector. So I'm a music collector from music from around the world. It always sort of frustrates me when I hear people say, I ask them, what kind of music do you like? I say, I like everything. I said, well, do you like Mongolian throat music? And I said, and they say, what's that? I said, well, you don't like everything, do you? and a little known fact, I've actually remixed Sanko Nemchalak, a Mongolian throat Tuvan singer, as well as remixing Basement Jacks in my time. So that passion for music and culture and food led this creative journey of leadership into, and a real deep passion for communication. I won a marketing award whilst I was at university, an international marketing award from the Institute of Directors. And I won that award, and it sort of led me to working in the music industry. First, making the tea for a small record label in Bath that worked with the Buena Vista Social Club in Cuba at the time when that was being done, to then sort of working for EMI, signing artists, amazing artists like and developing artists like Katie Tunstall, to then working for Disney and running their music division in Europe with working with Miley Cyrus and Jonas Brothers and all that whole sort of High School Musical project, as well as working in technology, being sort of headhunted by the team at Apple to help kickstart Apple iTunes Europe, which is now called Apple Music in Europe, when there was just 5 of us. So it was at the beginning of something really extraordinary.
That feels like a sort of fairly pivotal moment in your life, sort of discovering you've got this innate creativity at university, and then having the privilege of almost taking your hobby and making it your career. I mean, does it feel like you're playing with your train set every day in your life, or is this really work even?
It is work because there are tough moments, and that's when you have to roll your sleeves up and you have to cry and let it all out and just pick yourself back up and keep going. But yeah, I discovered early on that I need to follow my passions if I'm going to be an unstoppable train, and that's what I've tried to be throughout my life. Sometimes with a bit of burnout, but I still continue with that passion for whatever I'm doing. But it's always linked to, as I said, creating amazing experiences, creating beautiful things, and hopefully helping people and making people smile, particularly people that come from less disadvantaged than I do. And I know because I always think that I could be them. I could have stayed in that, in a village in the Andes of Peru and not have my first pair of shoes till I was 7 years old, even today. And so
Mm.
that's why education and inequalities around education are so important to me.
And the music industry has a reputation for being both exciting and brutal. And did you see both sides of the music industry? I mean, it's an industry where if you're not successful, the money goes and flows elsewhere so fast.
That's right. Well, look, yeah, I mean, I got into the music industry in the late 90s when I always say when the helicopters had left. There was the sort of 80s and early 90s when, CDs started to become, sort of sell like hotcakes. And there was so much money, flying around. And so I've sort of, in a way, always worked in recession sectors and always transformed them or looked for innovative ways of moving things forward, finding new solutions, creating new businesses, being intrapreneurial within companies to kind of, innovate and sort of hopefully have an impact. But yes, Katie, no one wanted to sign Katie Tunstall when I first met her. They said actually she's the wrong side of 25, but
Wow.
I sat down with her. She had 120 songs that she'd co-written, 120 songs for a writer, singer, artist. She had co-written, and I said, "This, we could make 3 albums out of this. There's such quality here." And I just said to my boss at the time, I ran the record label. He was the owner. I said, she's going to be an unstoppable train. And I love that phrase. I'm sorry I've used it twice, but we have to back people that have real passion and commitment for their art and their craft, because they're going to do it with other people and they're going to build teams, whatever happens, because that's what they know how to do. And so I've always been a champion of these people, and I always look out for these people. And
Mm.
yes, the music industry is brutal. I've seen different sides, the sides where artists are not treated fairly, where executives, abuse their power. And I still see it today. I'm not in the industry day to day, although I'm on the board of a concept production company that's a not-for-profit and the Arts Council funded one called Comonor that I'm very proud to be on. But yeah, through that, I can still see how there's underrepresentation and not enough voices to really change the way the music industry could be. And I wish I could do more.
And any learnings that you can share with our listeners in terms of things that you learned how to deal with tough moments. What gave you the drive to push sort of Katie Tunstall through and make that happen. Lesser mortals might have just caved in if the owner doesn't want to do that. I mean, what sort of characteristics do you think helped you survive those periods?
Oh gosh, that's a huge question. I like to listen. I really like to listen to other people. I like to talk to people, but listen for as long as possible. I like to find a problem and before making a decision, again, just talk to people, ask them what their thoughts are, get their view, get their advice. But I always try to frame it within their context and understand them. But soon enough, I think when you start listening and you talk to a wide variety of people about a particular challenge or problem, certain truths start to come out, certain similarities of what people say, not everything, because everyone has their context, their experiences, even their agendas. So you have to see through that a little bit, but truths do come out. And so when truths do come out, you can't avoid that truth. You have to really listen to it. So, but there's also something around really getting to know yourself. get, I'm a data-driven person. I'm a fact-driven person. My wife calls me the king of due diligence, but I love looking at myself and really, really understanding what's in my gut. What does my gut really say? So I balance that gut feel, whereas that's where the passion is, right? That's where the passion, the pain, the happiness, the sort of want for a better world or whatever it might be, that's where that comes from. But then you mix that with your experience, with the information that you have, with the feedback you're getting from others, with the data you might have accumulated. That's how I think I've been able to get sometimes some really great results.
Yeah. And do you think as you've got older and wiser, you've believed in your instinct and your gut more and more? I know from I've thought over the years myself that I've had my gut instinct kicks in, and then I start having lots of conversations and listening, and slowly but surely my gut instinct gets persuaded, and I go against what my gut tells me, and then 6 months later you go, okay, I was right, my gut was right. And so the belief in your instincts grows as you become more experienced and more expert. Does that work for you, or have you always had strong instincts that you followed?
I think as a younger leader, I was much more of a top-down leader, like many of us are in this context, in this society that pushes us to be a certain way, that tells us, you've got to be so strong and strive forward, and this past generation that told us, or this past sort of social context that told us, yeah, entrepreneurship is amazing and go and work 24 hours a day and all of that kind of stuff. And I just don't think that is true. So as a younger leader, I was a lot more, as I said, sort of more forceful. But I very quickly learned that that's not the way that I want to behave, or I want to be, or I want to move forward. And actually to create the best teams, which I've been doing in the second part of my leadership these last sort of 10, 15 years, is more bottom up. It's more about empowering others. It's more about listening better, talking last. It's more about sort of, working on other people's ideas. And that excites me, having a better idea than mine that is actually more unique and more interesting. I love championing that. So that's my approach. So my gut feel now is different. I focus a lot, having had major bumps in the road, not just when I was a child, but also having suffered from burnout as a result of trying to work too much and trying to put myself too forward. I guess my approach is much more compassionate to myself and to others, to societies, and therefore I think that way you can listen better, you can sort of understand better and absorb better, and you can spot the blind spots better as well, so that gut feel is much more less instinctive and more natural and more comfortable. And I think as I've grown older, some fears, as I wrote in a LinkedIn post a few weeks ago, some fears have evolved and changed, but there's still those fears, new fears, now that we are more complex beings as we get older, with mortgages and with families and with more responsibilities. But also I've found ways of sort of managing those fears, ways of keeping playful, of having fun, of enjoying life, as well as and enjoying working life, that is, through five rhythms dancing, through going on clowning courses, through yoga and running and swimming, and my love, which is surfing, and my love, which is cooking. So and through great mentoring and great coaching that I've both given and I've received.
Yeah, and how important have mentors been in your life? Have you got sort of two or three people through your career that have guided you, and now you're a mentor and you're sort of giving back? How important was people sort of believing in you as you developed your career?
Crucial. Dave Hammond, my first teacher at secondary school, that really believed in me. Amazing guy. Rob Ricks and Roberto Rodriguez at university, my two lecturers, who I still hold dear to my heart, who I still keep in touch with, we went dinner together last year. And Di Burton, who passed away, who was also at uni, she really drove my marketing instinct and my knowledge. So I pay tribute to her. And through business, my first mentor and the one that I've had for the longest was a gentleman, an amazing gentleman who became like a father to me, Nick Elwin, who was big in the business link community at the time. But he helped me write my first business plan, and he really helped me understand what makes business happen. A man with a huge heart, but a huge, phenomenal financial acumen and background. But he sadly passed away last year, which broke my heart. So, but yes, I've had other mentors. I have mentors right here at the Institute of Imagination that sit on my board. And I've been blessed to have really great coaches as well.
Mm. And talk to me a bit about the Institute for Imagination. I mean, what made you go from a successful career in what I'll call the corporate music world, and it feels like a big pivotal moment in your life. Was it, or was it just a gentle change and a natural evolution?
No, it's a very very focused pivot for sure. I've always sort of made time throughout my career, even from when I was a student campaigner and an activist. I've always made time to be on a board's be a trustee on a board, support a particular charity, mainly around poverty alleviation or fighting racism or children's education inequalities. And so, I wanted to change the world with a business that I started when I left Disney in 2010. That business became a social enterprise called Ceviche and Andina Restaurants. We brought Peruvian foods to the UK and turned a business from nothing, from just an idea on the back of an envelope, to 6 years later turning over £10 million, something I'm really proud of. And we helped the local communities, helped ex-offenders, and something that grew from nothing into a food that people didn't know about in the UK. And so that was my first foray into sort of really going, how can I work full time into creating change in the food system, into nutrition, into feeding people better and healthier, and to help in local communities. And at the same time, we supported a children's education charity called Amantani, based in the UK, but with programs in Latin America. So again, that international work that I had at Disney and Apple came to great use. And when I stopped working at Ceviche and Andina in 2019, I said, right now I can dedicate my whole life fully, all my time to impact. So that's when I was blessed with being offered the role at the Institute of Imagination 4 years ago, but also a role on the board of Big Issue Invest, which is the largest UK social bank and social investor. So I'm proud to be on their board as well. So so it's been a journey that's just, has been I guess half of it has been in a corporate career, both small and big companies, tech, record companies, and the other half in sort of social enterprise and charities and impact through social finance and impact investment, but also, of course, working on changing systems like the education system.
What was it like, sort of getting Ceviche off the ground?
It was hard. It was hard.
I thought you might say that.
No one. When I said the word ceviche, they couldn't pronounce it. When I said Peru, I'm bringing Peru. I want to open a restaurant of Peruvian food. They said Peru, Beirut. They thought I was talking about Beirut. They didn't even know where Peru was, or they thought Peru is a land of llamas. They didn't realize Peru's got this is a gastronomic powerhouse in the world. So it was hard. It was really difficult. I mean, I walked, to find our first site. I walked the streets and wore out 3 pairs of shoes, just knocking on doors and just taking my clicker outside of a restaurant to watch how people came in and out of the restaurant, to see how many, what types, who was going in where, in what street, in what part of the street. You've got to be in the right part of the street to get it right, to get a business, whether it's a shop or a restaurant. And then convincing investors was hugely challenging. And I'd never done that. I've never raised money. I'm now an expert at raising money for philanthropy, but also for impact investment and equity. And I've advised, family offices and corporate foundations on their boards as a result. But at the time, I didn't know how to do that at all. So all I had was my phone and my grit and my passion and my knowledge, my growing knowledge, and my curiosity about Peruvian food and how I could really, excite and enchant people in this country. And I think that caught on. That caught on because I sort of started to talk about it on Twitter, and people were trying to sort of say, well, what is this food you're talking about? And bit by bit, we got a fan base, and with that fan base, we got investment, and we opened our first restaurant, and we had a queue out the door.
Yeah. And when did the restaurant open?
Well, the first restaurant opened Ceviche on Frith Street in Soho, right across from my favorite venue in the world, Ronnie Scott's jazz venue. Big jazz fan, among other musics. That opened in March 2012, just the same month that, unfortunately, my father passed away with 6 months' notice of having suffered from cancer. So it was the happiest month of my life, but also the saddest month of my life.
Gosh. And in running a restaurant, I mean, no experience of running a restaurant and no experience of sort of bringing Peruvian food, another nation's food, to another country. What do you think was about it that really enabled it to catch on? What was it you did that got the queues out the door? Because those things don't happen by accident.
Well, I'm always curious. I'm curious about the way the world works. I'm curious about challenges. I'm curious about inequalities, I've said, or the suffering people have, but also curious about the things people love. And that's why I'm curious about different business sectors. That's why I'm a cross-sector guy. I've moved different industries. And I do that with curiosity, with humility, with connection. I sort of think, what would it be like to be in hospitality or in the food industry? What are the food systems like? How can I learn from it? And of course, I love to eat and I love to cook. I was a, barman before I was a DJ at university, I was a barman, but I was also a commie chef. So I know the very basics. So yes, you're right. I didn't know anything about it really. But again, I'm just curious. So I start talking to people. I start sort of connecting. I was knocking on doors. Harvey Smythe, who was running Pizza Express, didn't know me from Adam, opened the door to me and we had a chat. Nuno Mendes, a top chef. Rene Redzepi, who'd won, World Food Awards with top Michelin restaurants. Also, we had a chat. And I just tried to talk to as many people that I could get my hands on to tell me about the industry, to sort of, learn through their mistakes and listen to what landed for me. So I'm blessed to have had a lot of contacts in those early days that I didn't know before, but just connecting with them, just saying, look, this is what I want to do. I've got something new to give here. What do you suggest? And through that, bit by bit, we gained the knowledge to open our first restaurant.
And did you give up your corporate life and go to zero, or did you keep your job in the corporate world and try to do both things at the same time and give yourself a bit of an insurance policy? How did you deal with that pivotal moment?
No, I gave up that world. I gave up that industry. I gave up so many things. And sometimes when you believe in something, you have to do that. So no, I didn't have a cushion at all. In fact, more than that, I sold my house to invest in our business. And actually, 6 months before, I'd been trying to knock on doors and sort of pitching to investors. And I must have pitched to about 300 investors. And each time they said no, it was a blow to my stomach. It felt like a punch in the guts. But I kept going and I kept listening to them. And so I rebuilt my starting team and found, a few amazing wise men and women that helped me in that first part of the journey. And we raised the money. But it was only when I said, look, after not being able to raise the investment, I said, look, I'm putting all my money into this. And my wife bravely sort of said, go for it, Martin. You've always, when you followed this restlessness that you have, things happen, changes happen. So go for it. And I did. And that's when everybody said, this guy is really either crazy or he's onto something. And that's when phenomenal investors like Jim Beach or Alex Chesterman or Michael Acton Smith sort of said, okay, this guy, let's go for it.
And, that's a fascinating point, that you're either crazy or you're onto something. It's almost that bipolar, isn't it? These situations where you've put everything on the line, you totally believe in it, and yet you're either deemed crazy or you're onto something. But the fact that you might be onto something suddenly attracts other people, and the belief starts to radiate and ripple through others. Is that sort of your experience? Was there a tipping point where you suddenly found a way of articulating what you were doing so that people got it?
Yeah, look, you have to do your research. You have to wait for the right time for yourself, as well as the
Yeah.
market, as well as a sector. Timing is absolutely everything, but it's not just timing of the market. A lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of innovators, they chase the thing out there. You've also got to chase the thing inside. So the two must be aligned. And that's what happened with me. I did have other ideas. I could have gone in other directions, but this was the best. The one that where it blended, everything that I was about. This, they call it in Japan the ikigai, right? It all comes together. And so it doesn't create a blind belief. That's arrogance for me. But it creates a drive that can become flow, that can become relentlessness, a positive relentlessness. And so I think that's what I've always had when I've sort of really believed in projects, in programs, in the organizations that I lead and work for. It takes time either to get into that mode or to embody it, so to speak. I think you have to embody it as well as retaining your own sort of self-worth and your own personality through it. And that's how I feel at the Institute of Imagination. That's where I am right now.
And what was the time period between you deciding to take on this project and you thinking this is going to work?
Well, I've known about the Institute of Imagination for many years, and so I've always admired the quality of their delivery of their programs, both national and international. And I could see that they were desperately trying to be more community-based, more local. I could see that they were trying to use technology in new and innovative ways after being an organization that delivers their work, very in person, which was always magical. And I could see they wanted to innovate and look at, becoming not just a great charity, but also a thought leader in the space of creative thinking, of imagination, of course, and of really living the competencies that our founding patron, Sir Ken Robinson, really sort of drove for. And so I thought, I've got something to add there. I've got some leadership to add there. And I met the trustees and the board and the senior leadership team, and I was blown away. I could see cracks all over the place. And no company and no charity, no organization is perfect. Life is messy. So we carry on trying to dust it up, tighten it up and sharpen it up. And that's what I do. And so I could see that I could add value. As as you've said, sort of, I've come from hospitality, music industry, technology. For me, all of that is very, very creative, and there's so many transferable skills that I've learned that I could tell you some fun stories about how to market a menu in a restaurant in the same way as you market an album in the music industry, or how to sort of talk about programs and really connect with donors in the same way.
And given you're a data guy, give us some data points on the Institute of Imagination, just so people can get a sense of how it gets involved with schools, how many children get involved with it. I think it would be helpful for people to understand a bit more about that.
So just in terms of the Institute of Imagination, last year we worked with 17,000 children. But we're not just interested in the breadth of impact, we're interested in the depth of impact. So this year one of our programs is based in Tower Hamlets, where there's the highest number of children in deprivation in the UK as a borough. And we're working across a child's life, shall we say, different points of contact with a child's life through schools, through different venues like the Young V&A and Rich Mix, different churches and different mosques, as well as with the community through online measures and through partners, because we're the consortium lead for a program called The Power of Play. In a way, we've grown our work over the last few years because it's a huge challenge. There's many children living in poverty now. 4.5 million was the latest stat on that. And there's also 175,000 unfilled STEM jobs out there. Now imagine that in the future. So what we try to bring is creative thinking skills growth, working on vital human skills that children will need for the future, based on, as I mentioned, on Sir Ken Robinson's competencies, but also sort of work in an interdisciplinary way, bring in science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, the STEAM skills into the learning environment, not just in schools, but in communities. So all of that enriches a child's potential.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm, like you, passionate about creativity and its importance to the UK, to the quality of life, to the economic prosperity. I would really want to thank you for participating in the podcast today, Martin. It's been absolutely fabulous having you as a guest. Now, we always end with a little fun fact, and I know, coming from Peru, you have a very special relationship with Paddington Bear, and I know you've got a great little story to tell about Ceviche and Paddington Bear. So let's share that little morsel with folks, shall we?
Well, thanks for asking me that. No, it is a lovely story. When I came to this country, actually, I wasn't a fan of Paddington Bear because that's among the most awful things people called me, and that wasn't just the only thing that happened. But at that school, when I suffered from racism, some of the lighter moments were when they called me Paddington, which I didn't like at all. So I had this love-hate relationship with this lovely little bear, right? But the film was about to come out, the new film, Paddington 1. I think, I forget what the name of it fully was, but Paddington 1 was about to come out, and it was lovely. I was working and running Ceviche, and I picked up the Evening Standard one day, and they had interviewed him. As if it was a real person. They'd interviewed him. And they were asking him...
he's not real? Yeah, of course he's real.
Well, they had interviewed him. They were asking him, what's your favorite color? And, what's your favorite film from last year? And what's your favorite food? And they asked him, what's your favorite restaurant? And he said, and he'd answered, Ceviche. It's this little place in Soho that just serves delicious food from a country I adore. And oh my goodness, when I saw that, I nearly fell off my seat on the Southwestern train going back to East London. And so the next day I sort of thought, oh my goodness, I've got to try and get in touch with his people, and so I tried to contact a friend of a friend of a friend. And I said, look, can you get this message to thank Paddington? So I wrote to the friend of a friend of a friend. I said, look, please thank him for this message. It's really touched my heart. It was wonderful. And actually, a few days later, I got a message back from the friend of a friend of a friend, which said, Martin, Paddington would just like you to know that he received your message. He's really grateful for your message, and that he meant every word of it. And I just oh my goodness, I'm even more in love with this little bear. And I went to watch the film, and it was wonderful. And I completely rekindled my relationship with Paddington. And later on through the years, I got to meet Michael Bond. I was blessed to meet him and his family, and just a wonderful, wonderful superstar creative of this world that I'm blessed to have met finally. But that Christmas, my wife. I told my wife and my kids about the story, and that Christmas, my present from them was an apron with a picture of Paddington on it, which they'd had sort of scanned and put on the apron with the words underneath. He meant every word.
What a brilliant way to end. And thank you so much for being a guest on Pivot Points. And please keep pushing the power of creativity, and please keep using your passion to drive something that I'm passionate about and I believe is so important for our nation's health. So thank you so much, and thank you for being such a great guest.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brampai and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpie.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.